Hello, everyone. You're very welcome to this morning's webinar titled the European Heat Pump Association Membership Explained. My name is Paul Kenny. I'm the Director General of the European Heat Pump Association. Broadly, what I'd like to do is take you through just a little over 10 slides, explaining the membership of the European Heat Pump Association and leave some time for some questions. We also have a little bit of a testimonial from one of our members. So I'll just get straight into it. We should have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. I'll try and answer them in real time or wait till the end, if that's okay. So why people join the European Heat Pump Association? So broadly, we are roughly half of our members are heat pump manufacturers, a good chunk of component manufacturers, national associations, research institutes and universities, test centres, utilities, consultancies, financial partners, and heat pump-based services and startups. So people who provide services to the heat pump industry as such. All of these have a key stake in ensuring that the European heat pump industry thrives and to make sure that the European demand for heat pumps rise. Going to talk a little bit about membership benefits. We have a couple of slides on each of these, so I'll get through some of those in a little bit more detail later on. But broadly, the things that people cite as why they want to join the association is we have a dedicated market intelligence team. So we work a lot on market data with our national associations to try and bring together and coordinate the data to allow people make proper business decisions. The second major factor of membership of the association is really our work on European policy, not just product policy, which we do work on very extensively, which includes eco-design, refrigerants, and things in the circular economy, but also in things like energy policy and the things that drive heat pump sales, like the emissions trading schemes, like the European Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, Renewable Energy Directive, and all of those things encourage member states to increase the market share of heat pumps for heating buildings. We also have an extensive a range of events and networking sessions which allow the industry network together. It allows component manufacturers and their customers. It allows heat pump manufacturers, universities, and so on to work together and to network. We also bring in a lot of external people to a lot of our networking sessions, including people like European governments and other people who are try and encourage the uptake of heat pumps in Europe. Another key thing that we do is we have 20 different European projects right now. They cover a wide variety of things, from skills to innovation to industrial heat pumps. And a lot of members would participate in those projects, and things like Horizon Europe, Life, Erasmus, and they are things that support the industry broadly and specifically in innovation in certain sectors. So right now there's significant money from Europe for innovation in the industrial heat pump space, and a large number of our projects really focus on the deployment of industrial heat pumps in industry. We support the industry also in terms of communications and media. We engage directly with a lot of the larger European-based political and financial media through press releases, through broader communications for policy lobbying and for market development. And finally, one of the key things we do is we have a European key mark for heat pumps, which allows members to manufacturers in particular to certify their product, and those key mark certificates are available in many different member states as part of subsidy schemes. So you apply once for the key mark based on eco-design, and that allows your product to be used in many different subsidy schemes across Europe. So we have a little question for you. What would matter most to you as a European Heat Pump Association member? So if you click on the QR code with your phone's camera, and we will share the results of this survey momentarily at the end of the session. And while you're all doing that, I will bring you on to the next slide, which is a video of one of our members giving a little testimonial. So I hope that was very useful. It's just a little flavor of what our members think about the association and why they are part of the European Heat Pump Association. So I guess the next question you have is thinking about policy. What are our key objectives on the policy agenda in Europe? You can see it? I can no longer see it. Okay, so policy objectives we have in Europe, really driving down cost, particularly of electricity, making sure that we have a really clear policy direction at a European level and down into member state level. So that really is about the shift from fossil fuel heating in buildings and industry to clean heat. So things like the electrification action plan, the heating and cooling strategy that are coming up shortly are a key focus of the association. In addition, we've tried to put energy security and competitiveness at the heart, provided for by heat pumps at the heart of European policymaking. We've worked hard on things like the Innovation Fund in industry and to try and ensure that Europe doesn't just think about very energy intensive industries, but thinks wider about all of the different industries across Europe and how they can use heat pumps to improve their competitiveness. And finally, things that decrease the cost of running a heat pump, like flexibility and supporting the grid, is also an important part of our policy direction. So try and reduce the amount of product requirements, but also increase the availability of cheaper tariffs that allow heat pumps provide grid stability services. In addition, how do we work with our members to work on these key policy scenarios? So members can choose and participate in a committee or a task force. So the committees of the association, which we'll go through a little bit later, cover kind of the overall things, like with the advocacy committee, the manufacturers committee, the industrial and district heating heat pump committee, the national associations committee, and those committees are kind of the broad overarching things. And then we have a specific policy discussion that we're going to have, like on, for example, refrigerants or flexibility. We have a task force that's open to all members to participate in. So when you want to participate in a given committee, you choose which one you want to, you sign up to it, and then we communicate directly. We have different calls on different topics, and when we communicate via emails, we do tend to send quite a few emails. You can read we have a very specific, 4 very specific ways of starting emails, ones that are for information. So it's useful information for members. Ones that are for feedback or inputs, so where we are seeking action from members, and for approval at the end of the process, where we have a final paper or a position to approve, that we ask members to come back to us specifically on a particular piece of information. So the next thing I think we're going to talk a little bit about is how do you gain information about what's going on in the market? So broadly, we have this market report that we publish each year when we get all of the different national associations reports back from each of the markets. In addition, we now have a new data platform that's updated whenever we get new data. It's broadly based, we have a free platform and then we have a members only platform. The members only platform has newer, more granular data. The free platform is a little bit older and less information. And that gives you real-time assessment of the markets in detail. And the report obviously covers the different types of heat pumps across member states. We are also working very hard in improving this. So we tend to bring out new and further data relatively quickly or relatively often, and we put it through this platform and then we communicate directly to members. So what does that data look like? So one of the things we have is our annual market overview, where we report the sales in each country, which markets increase, which markets decrease, what the stock are, what the different type of heat pumps that are applied in each of those countries. And that broadly allows the industry to assess where the market is going, which countries are growing, why they're growing. So we get a report back from each country, and that gives people a feel for what's next so they can think about forecasting. And we hear a lot from our members that this is a very important part of what they do. Another important thing that they really join the association for, as we spoke a little bit before, is the idea of being able to network with the industry, both with peers, with customers, with service providers, but also with politicians, with NGOs to ensure the NGOs have a similar position. But also a lot of our events try and target lobbying or policy development, and we try and ensure that we bring people along the journey of understanding the policy needs of the heat pump sector in general. And how we think about those policy needs, we generally work them through, as we spoke before, a little bit on our broadly our structure of our association. So we have at the top left, we have our manufacturers committee chaired by a manufacturer, in this case, Stiebel Eltron. We have our advocacy and communications committee, which is really a broad policy committee. National associations, Industrial and District Heat Pump Committee, Market Intelligence Committee is a new committee that we are starting this year. We also have Quality Label, and we have our Research and Innovation Committee. And those committees, I suppose, have different membership based on what people need. Members are relatively free to join the relevant committees. Obviously, you have to be a manufacturer to join the Manufacturers Committee. You have to be a national association to join the National Association Committee. Advocacy is open to all members. And then each of the specific task forces which work on particular topics like eco-design, energy competitiveness and finance, and Industrial Accelerator Act and so on, refrigerants, those task forces are open to all members to join. We also have a new task force this year called the Strategic Public Affairs Task Force, which looks to work with our members and in particular the advocacy members of our members, the advocacy staff, so the people who work on policy development in Brussels in particular. And that broadly is how we structure what we do and how we work. So each week, every second week, we do a bi-weekly policy tracker. So this updates the tasks and activities that the association has completed in the last 2 weeks, and it allows any member to pick up this document and say, well, I really want to find out what's the current state of refrigerant policy or what's the current state of eco-design. And each of our staff members who work on those things update this policy tracker. It goes out on a Thursday, and then on the Friday, every second week, we have an open call from 9:30 in the morning until 10:30. We generally have between 25 and 50 members join this call every second week, and they get to ask questions. So they read the policy tracker. If there's something not clear, or if they want to raise something to make sure we're aware of it, they join the call and we have a discussion that's open with members. And that call is a very useful way for our members to really stay up close and personal to the policy development of the association and broadly of European policy related to heat pumps. So finally, maybe just to kind of summarize, if you're thinking about joining the association, the first thing we do is we ask you to have a look. There's a QR code there. Look at your categories of membership. That'll be based on your turnover of heat pumps in Europe. We have a detailed FAQ for defining that. Some membership categories have very specific. So if you're a utility or a not-for-profit European interest group or a national association, we have specific categories for you, as opposed to it being based on turnover. So you fill out the application form when you want to join. That then goes to the secretariat, so to myself, to my colleague Birgit and Anastasia, and we review it and then package it up to the board. Oftentimes there's a bit of Q&A, a bit of over and back. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? We're not clear on how you said this. And broadly, as a trade association, we're open to anyone who wants to join, who has a specific reason for being in the, so who has an interest in the heat pump industry, who has an entity based in Europe, and, is broadly, they're kind of the main criteria to join the association. After that, the rest of the assessment of the application form is generally gets stuck on or has a lot of Q&A in terms of making sure the membership level is correct. So it's very important as a secretariat that each company contributes appropriate to the size of that company. And that's broadly the biggest challenge we have, is to make sure that people understand the full detail of that and that they're joining at the right membership level. So that's broadly it. Once that happens, it goes to the board for final voting, and that usually takes somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks, and we're back to the member then. So that is the end of the slides. I was hoping to take less than 20 minutes, and it's 11:19, so that's great. And it leaves us open to Q&A now. So if anyone has any questions, and I'll have a quick look at the chat and the Q&A. See if there are any questions. So first question is from Kevin. We provide tools that help installers work safely and more efficient. We are working with big manufacturers. Is there a group or channel that will help installers? It's a very good question, Kevin. We generally, at a European level, don't spend a huge amount of time on direct engagement with installation companies. We generally leave that to the national associations and through our members. However, we do things like coordinate. One of the projects we have is called SkillSafe, which is about a guide for installers to make sure they install safely with flammable refrigerants. So we do work on some issues, but in most cases, installers will join directly to a national association and not necessarily to the European Association. We do have some members that represent or that perform installations, of course, but they're generally much larger installers. So it's a little bit different. Maybe to go into a little bit of detail of your question, if there is something that many members feel we should work on, so if there's a new policy discussion that comes along, should we work on that? Should we develop a position? Should we engage with the European institutions? Should we provide a guidance or otherwise, or coordinate? That generally goes to the advocacy committee, the chair and vice chair of the advocacy committee, and the committee itself discusses whether we should add that piece of work, and then we decide whether we should do that or not within the boundaries of capacity of the association. We can't work, obviously, on everything. We don't have an infinite amount of resources. So it really is up to the members to decide what does the association do with its resources. So I hope that kind of answers the question. However, what I would say is a lot of the time where innovation happens from component manufacturers or service providers to the industry, they generally will do things like engage at networking sessions and forums and other things like that. We have, as part of our manufacturers committee, we have a slot for new members to provide innovation and detail what they're about. And that generally kind of creates a business to business networking approach. So kind of a broadcast in general, and then we do networking sessions afterwards and networking corners, which allows suppliers, innovators, service providers to network directly with manufacturers to take up their product or innovation. Okay, we have a few questions coming in. Dylan, I will answer your question next. Is membership open to component suppliers or heat pumps, for instance, plastic suppliers? Absolutely, yes. We have copper, metal, we have members who provide probably all of the components of heat pumps between heat exchangers. They're very active members. Compressor manufacturers, obviously, active members and leading members of the association, but right down to smaller components, to testing equipment, to testing centres, to service providers. Across the board, members join. Why do they join? From component suppliers, to understand the scale and scope and direction of the market, to understand legislation that's coming along that will affect products. So, for example, our manufacturers who supply digital components like inverters and otherwise very much engage in things like some of the digital requirements of heat pumps. But also they join to network with their final end customers and to understand the challenges that their end customers have in doing so. Next question from Adrian. How many representatives of an organization can participate in the activities of EHPA? We do not have a limit, Adrian, to that. We do ask members to ensure that the Secretariat has up-to-date lists of members and lists of people, and they can join individual things. So, for example, a very large heat pump manufacturer will have someone who works dedicated on refrigerants, someone else who works on digital, someone else who works on public affairs or lobbying or kind of the wider energy industry, someone else who works on purchasing or trade laws or the CBAM or things like that. So we do have a range of different people that engage directly with the association. And generally for much larger organizations like that, they have someone who coordinates, who sits on the ADCO, but they also, they're the ones who coordinate internally to make sure, oh, there's a question on such and such on security requirements, to make sure that that question goes to the right person within their organization. And the organizations, Adrian, who get the most out of the European Heat Pump Association are the ones who make sure the relevant people are tracking and advising and engaging with the association. And that's how people get the best out of the association. Darshan, how are the market intelligence report data figures built up or collected? That's a good question. So we engage directly with our national associations. We have a full detailed, I suppose, data collection process with their national associations, and they have their own processes with their members. And they collect data directly off their manufacturers in each country. In some cases, there is a very well developed, in a lot of our bigger markets, there's a very well developed and expert-led data collection. In some of the smaller countries and associations, it's a little bit less developed. And in some countries where we don't have a real strong association, we have to try and get more estimated numbers from different market actors in those countries, in the smaller countries and smaller levels. Generally speaking, we will have the different levels of data quality very clearly outlined, with estimates being estimates and actual reports being actual reports. Generally speaking, we report on half-year sales and yearly sales, and the national associations do more granular. So Kevin, your question is, we applied to join the EHPA on the 31st of March. How do we find out if we've been accepted? I would say if you drop me or any of my team an email. We'll let you know the status of the decision. So they generally go to the board. We would usually expect it takes a week or two to go to the board, and generally decisions are made thereafter. I think it's probably a bilateral discussion we might have afterwards to get any more detail. So just another couple of questions in the chat. So as a third-party testing and certification body based outside of Europe, is there any suitable membership pathway to non-European test centre? Yes, so we have an associate member. So our statutes have a provision for associate members who can join the association who are not based in Europe. They do not have the same rights as European-based members. And I don't know off the top of my head the differences between all of those. So I would probably not answer now, but I think if you drop us a quick email, we can answer that question to you. Okay, next question from Teresa. Since market trends are strongly influenced by European subsidy and incentive schemes, what are your expectations for their evolution in coming years? Which regions are likely to see the most support in the future? Teresa, that's a good question, and it probably is a PhD answer as opposed to something that I'll attempt to do in a short term. I think what's really interesting is when you look at the discussions from member states' governments in the last number of weeks as a response to the current energy crisis. We see really strong statements. The Prime Minister of France came out and said they've launched their own electrification action plan, and they had a very, very significant, would say, policy direction to say we are going all in on electrification. Again, in Spain, there was quite a good discussion, maybe not quite as strong as the UK, as France. In the UK, again, a very strong push from the UK Minister for Energy, Ed Miliband, where they have put together over the last 18 months since Labour has got into government, a really strong focus on decarbonisation, on the shift from gas to heat pumps for home heating. They've put money, they've put policy, they've put new build, they've put a really strong focus and a lot of resources in government. So we'd expect that market, which is a large market, to grow. The Dutch, the Belgians, again, very strong policy support, wavering a little bit in Germany, but a very strong market last year, grew very substantially. And I think broadly, I would say in Germany, there is I suppose, a little bit of a nuance. The German government has been providing mixed signals, strong policy support through subsidies, but a different narrative publicly, which is a little bit strange. I won't get into too much more detail. And then every other European country, so Scandinavia is very strong, very historically very strong, ubiquitous technology rollout of heat pumps. In Austria, Switzerland, again, really strong policy towards heat pumps. And then as you go further east, it's a mixed bag. It's different countries have different approaches. Again, not as much financial capacity for large subsidy schemes because their economies are growing very sharply. And then in other countries like Italy, a less well developed heat pump industry. However, again, what I would say is when we think about heat pumps, there's lots of different types of heat pumps and a really strong need for heating and cooling, which heat pumps provide. And the southern parts of Europe, what you see is air-based heat pumps or air-to-air heat pumps being something that people need as the temperature rises. I'm going to keep going with questions. Is the EHPA involved in EU-level work for electric grid resilience, especially against digital and other cyber threats? This would be a critical aspect as the European Heat Pump Association promotes the energy transition and wider use. So we have it's called the DigiFlex task force, which works on a number of different parts of the digital and flexibility. transition. So yes, all of our members are working on cyber resilience. We inform. We don't. We do a reasonable amount on that, but it's mainly conditions that members need to ensure they know of and develop their cyber resilience. In terms of other things like the grid connection codes, grid connection code for demand response, we do have a lot of work done on that, and we engage very heavily on some of those. We also, as part of that task force, seek to try and develop as much as we can the understanding at a European level of the capabilities of heat pumps to support the grid and to ensure that heat, for two main reasons. One, the grid costs don't go too high because we overinvest in copper versus flexibility, but probably predominantly so that heat pumps can use cheaper energy. And it's not just passively using cheaper energy, but as we develop this into the future, what I think we will see is aggregators acting within the market to keep energy prices down by shifting demand. So I'll give you an example. If we all turned on our air conditioning in the summer at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. when the sun has gone down and gas generators have to run, you go up the merit order, or more expensive energy generators come on board. If we schedule by giving people cheaper prices earlier in the day, so at 12, 1, 2 o'clock, and they have cheaper prices, they might schedule their air conditioning to come on, pre-cool their house before they get home when it's very, very cheap to run because we've lots of cheap solar energy. It will overall be cheaper to cool your home, but also the grid costs come down and it's cheaper for everyone in society. So things like that are very much part of how we are trying to focus policy in the future to make sure that we can run heat pumps for lower costs. Enrico, what lobbying actions is EHPA currently undertaking in EU legislation in general, and more specifically on topics related to fluids, to refrigerants? So right now we are preparing a response to the PFAS, the SAEC questionnaire, the Socioeconomic Assessment Committee of the PFAS discussion, and then we will take that forward. We did some work on the REACH. We did a lot of work on F-gas. It's probably one of the, we have a full-time staff member plus others join in on refrigerants in general. We have a committee of the association. We have a task force of the association that works on refrigerants in particular. And we have a lot of detailed positions. We did a detailed membership survey through a third party. We pulled together a lot of detail, granular detail across the different application types and are responding to that consultation. Wider, in terms of our wider legislation, it's quite an extensive thing. So we'll say on trade, the Industrial Accelerator Act, we've worked a lot on, a little bit on some of the other things around trade. The energy legislation, so the RED, the Renewable Energy Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, the governance regulation. We've worked on all of those. The governance regulation is currently open for consultation, and we've submitted a consultation to that. Then we have the Electrification Action Plan and the Heating and Cooling Strategy, the European Energy Security Review or legislation review. So all of those have a submission from us. The Construction Services Regulation, we've submitted into that. Then eco-design, we work a lot on eco-design. We've people fully focused on eco-design because it has a big impact on this. And of course, the response to the Iranian crisis, we're working very hard to make sure that we worked very hard on the Accelerate EU document that was published. And you may notice on the Accelerate EU, the Council President von der Leyen in her speech said, we need to make sure that electricity is the least taxed energy vector, or the least taxed energy supply for European citizens. That was entirely because the European Heat Pump Association did a basket of work last year to identify very clearly that where countries tax electricity much more than gas, electricity prices are much more expensive than gas. and heat pump deployment is much less. We did all the analysis, we published it, we lobbied for it, we did a big comms campaign around it, and it has become the dominant narrative in how we get the energy transition moving, is this shift of taxation from electricity to gas to bring down the relative cost of the two supplies. So we are very influential at a European level. We're one of the biggest energy think tanks, or sorry, trade associations, and we are quite effective in getting our positions across. And things like the Industrial Accelerator Act, we have done a lot of work internally with our members to get a really thoughtful and well-developed position. And the first draft of the Industrial Accelerator Act that was published by the Commission very much is in line with the position of our members, which is very positive. So another question regarding the interests of the association members. So the question is, could manufacturers heat pump systems and related equipment with the associations be interested in connecting with suppliers of automated manufacturing systems aimed at optimizing production processes? In particular, I'm referring to dedicated industrial automation production lines, presses and forming, and so on. Does the association also support this kind of industrial technological networking between manufacturers and suppliers of advanced production systems? So networking, absolutely. And we do have some members that just work on production equipment and testing systems. And we have had in the past some of those presentations at manufacturing committees. We currently do not work on things associated with production efficiency in the association. If our members so wished for us to do that, we could. But in general, where there is a competitive advantage of one member over another member, i.e. by being more productive with their production systems, the trade association is generally not asked to intervene. So if you're 20% more competitive than your competitor, you don't want the trade association to say, hey, look, everyone, look what they're doing to make themselves more competitive, to bring up the level of competitiveness of their competitor in the trade association. It's generally not a role for a trade association. What we generally try and do is ensure that the wider industry has the opportunity to be more competitive. However, in our networking and in the presentation of component manufacturers and otherwise, they very much do that work within the networking sessions and within their presentations of their components to manufacturers. So it is part of the business-to-business relationship that we foster, but as to providing guidance and things like that at an association level, it's generally not what trade associations should do. We try and stay, or we have to stay, out of the competition between our members. Let's see, is there any other questions? Okay, I think that is all the questions I have so far. Another one has dropped in there. Nope, just a thank you. I hope that's of use. I will give another 2 or 3 minutes for any more questions. And before I do, I'm going to show the poll. Well, my colleague Nasty is going to show the poll. Okay, so very good. So you can see the market intelligence, projects intelligence, networking and exchange, certification, market intelligence, industry applications, certification again, policy influence. So good. I think we've covered probably most of those things, I would suggest. Yeah, broadly, and project involvement. Okay, so broadly, most of those things have been covered. maybe a little bit more on projects because it's covered there. We have a research and innovation committee where they will inform all of our members. So we have a lot of technical research institutes and universities. That would be where they would coalesce and network quite a lot. We share all the different European funding schemes that are available for heat pumps, and we actively support and join with members in getting European funding for overcoming certain market barriers or supporting innovation. So I think those sort of things channel through that research and innovation committee. I think that is all our questions. I think that's all of the questions in both the chat and the Q&A. I hope that is of use to members or to potential members, and I look forward to seeing active applications. And I will close the webinar and thank you all very much for joining.